I do think there is such a thing as too much anticipation. So this is one of those videos that I just had a thought that I think I could get a video out of that, and I kind of want to talk it through. So I want to talk about, because I mentioned this when I talked about the Captain Marvel first trailer coming out, that the marketing cycle for the major blockbusters appears to have shrunk back down to about a 6-month cycle from when we get the first real tangible piece of marketing, usually an official image followed by a trailer, which, you know, Captain Marvel, that's coming out early in 2019. It's about 6 months out from when the trailer dropped. And that is, frankly, a monumental relief for me, because we had a period of a few years where the big blockbusters got onto a kick of giving us a teaser and start dropping trailer material a year out from release. And I think that actively damaged the release of some films, some notable ones even. And I kind of want to just talk through the history, how that happened and why it was a bad thing, and why I'm really glad it seems to be a phase that was relatively short-lived. I think in many ways the whole thing kicked off with Star Wars The Force Awakens, because in 2014, at the very end of 2014, we got the first teaser for a brand new Star Wars movie. And it was really, really, really good. I will still stand by that teaser. It gave me chills down my spine. You know, the Luke's voice, "You have that power too," like, still gives me chills. I think it was a fantastically composed trailer, and Star Wars, especially knowing how long it had been since the last film had been in the theaters, and you know, the potential of what these new films could be, it was the kind of property that you could get away with dropping a first teaser that far out. But that was also a really carefully put together teaser in terms of showing things that were complete, and really only having a couple of notable special effects shots in it. You know, it's a lot of black, it's a lot of voiceover, it's, you know, it's Finn in the desert, it's an image of Rey. It's most of it's practical stuff that's in that first teaser, because they didn't have to worry about the effects not being done or looking off. And unfortunately, as is so often the case with Hollywood, other studios saw the insane level of anticipation that that teaser and that marketing campaign, year-long marketing build-up, created for Star Wars The Force Awakens. And they went, okay, how do we replicate that? And it's not an inherently bad thing in movies or anything else to look at something that's successful and try and go, well, what lessons can we learn from that? The problem is that studio executives, marketing executives, that whole upper echelon of Hollywood, they want quantifiable stuff. And they also don't like to hear that something that worked for another studio won't work for them. So what that means is when something like this hits, they go, okay, break this out into its component parts. First teaser a year out, and then keep building the anticipation over the next year equals big bucks, not taking into account the sort of unique state that Star Wars as a franchise was in that allowed that to work. And I think the biggest hit that was taken by other people trying to emulate that was honestly the DCEU, or World of DC, I suppose we're supposed to call it now. This can happen even in a shorter marketing cycle, but I feel it was much more prevalent in longer marketing cycles, which is that we got a lot more spoilers dropped in trailers. Not necessarily first trailers, but by the second, third, fourth, in some case, trailers for these things, they want to have something new in each trailer, and it wasn't too long before they were dropping stuff that really should have been surprises in the film. Wonder Woman's appearance in Batman v Superman should not have been in the marketing. Or, you know, even for a movie that wasn't very good, Wolverine's cameo in X-Men Apocalypse should not have been in the marketing. But when it's going for so long, they worry about it, about the marketing campaign losing steam as you get closer to release. So they're like, God, we have to be sure there's a new whoa moment in the new trailer. What else can we put in there? You end up with stuff getting spoiled. And then in addition to that, bringing it back to DC specifically again, you have things like the trailer for the first trailer for Justice League dropping. I don't think they'd even finished filming the movie, and they were dropping a trailer. And the thing is, any film is going to be changed and altered and developed over the course of its being made. As a general rule of thumb, unless you're dealing with like a writer-director auteur on a fairly small budget where they have really tight control, the movie that you have on paper, i.e. the script, is not exactly the same movie that you shoot, which is not exactly the same movie that you find in the edit, which is not exactly the same movie that you finally release to theaters after it's been revised based off notes. It is an evolving process, and when you put stuff that far out, you don't know what's going to change. You don't know what you're going to use. You don't know what could be completely altered. And actually, even the franchise that started this and did it successfully, Star Wars, I think that's part of the reason of what happened with Rogue One. Rogue One became infamous for how many of the shots in especially the first trailer were not in the finished film. And I think a big part of that issue was how far out from release that first trailer dropped, because those shots were very cool shots. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with what Gareth Edwards said he did and how he ended up with those shots, which was in the process of, you know, setting up for other things, realizing, ooh, that's just a really cool shot. I'm not sure we'll use it, but get it. Maybe we will. And then a lot of them he ended up not using. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it becomes a problem when a marketing team starts combing through footage and comes across what is admittedly really cool shots and going, that should be in the trailer, and you're not far enough along in the post-production phase of it to know that, oh wait, you shouldn't use that, it's not going to be in the film. You're too early. So when you're making marketing material that early, everything's on the table. Everything that looks finished is on the table and viable for use in marketing. So you end up with stuff that does not turn up well. Or another thing that happens with something like Justice League, although this was also compounded by the timing for when they were shooting, they really didn't give enough time from when Batman v Superman wrapped to be able to make any adjustments based off the reaction to that film. It just assumed that that would be a universally loved film, and it wasn't. I mean, some people like it, that's awesome, but it was really divisive, and it didn't get the reception that the studio was hoping for, certainly. So in the marketing and having marketing material come out that early also compounded that issue to a certain degree, because you start putting out marketing material that far out, and if you get a negative reaction from the fans, it's far enough out from the release that executives feel that there's time to quote-unquote fix it. Because if you drop a first trailer for something and the response from the people who are supposed to love it is meh, or that worries us, or what have you, and you're still a year out from production, there's somebody at some level who's going to look at it and panic and go, oh my God, this isn't going to work. What can we change? And I think that's a big part of it. Like, reshoots get a lot of press these days in terms of the size and scope of the reshoots. And reshoots, first of all, let's be clear, are part of the typical filmmaking process. Every film does reshoots, but reshoots do seem to be more extensive these days. And again, I think part of that is this desire to change or fix a film later on, much later in its development than normally would have been typical. And this desire to fix things. And again, I think starting to get feedback that far out from release is part of what has fed that mentality that has resulted in these things that have, and you know, and I already said, you know, films change from the start to the finish of the process, but we are getting things that are changing way more than I think you would have normally expected to see for things with this kind of backing from the studio, with these kinds of budgets, with this kind of, you know, needs to be successful nature to them. Because you look at something like Justice League, and you had the early trailers where everything was gray and everything was dark, and people who didn't like Batman v Superman were like, great, it's all going to be gray and dark and gritty again. And then you got a later trailer that was literally lightened up. It felt like they just turned up the brightness filter on the whole film, and it looks reactionary. I mean, it probably was reactionary, but it's a bad look regardless, because even if it was always the plan for that sky in the climax of Justice League to be red instead of the gray we initially saw in the trailer, it still makes it look like you're initially trying to sell us on unfinished stuff, because it's changed drastically even within the marketing materials. Say nothing about when we get to the final thing. And I don't think there's actually that much benefit to a year-long active marketing cycle. I mean, you know, obviously these movies get announced several years out, you know, casting announcements, so there's that stuff. But they might as well announce that, because you can't keep it secret anymore. There's really no way, between leaks and people sneaking onto sets and literally these days everyone has a camera in their pocket. You can't keep this stuff secret. So you announce that stuff as you go. But then the proper marketing push, it really, a full year doesn't really give you much benefits. Again, Star Wars The Force Awakens got away with it, but I think that is in a large part because it was Star Wars and it had been so long since the previous Star Wars. It had been a decade. And I think that franchise was just in a unique position at the time they chose to do it. And I don't think really any other film has really reaped much benefit from stretching out its marketing cycle that far out. Because eventually, if you do it wrong, what can happen is by the time the thing comes out, you're like, oh, man, that hadn't come out yet? I feel like I've been hearing about it forever. And it actually lowers you. Whereas if you condense it down, again, 6 months can still seem like a while, but if you condense down that cycle, it becomes a bit more, oh, that thing. And then when you get a second trailer at, I don't know, around 3 months, you go, oh, right, that's coming out. And then you get your final trailer, you know, a couple weeks out from release, and you're like, yeah, mark my calendar. And that is a pace that makes sense in terms of the regularity with which you would remind your audience that it's on its way and you would get them excited for it. I don't see what adding more time to that, because you're stuck doing one of two things. Either you have bigger gaps between each trailer, basically allowing people to forget more or less since the first one came out, unless you truly blew their socks away. And then, you know, you might as well have started at the 6 month mark anyway, because whatever steam you built up with that first one's gone. Or you have to release more trailer material, and then we're back at what I said at before, you end up revealing too dang much. So I'm really glad, I'm really relieved that the marketing cycle seems to have shrunk back down to what I think is a manageable size. And I just really appreciate that. And I think I can thank Marvel for leading the way to a certain extent. And again, this isn't like Marvel does everything right. Marvel has a very practical reason to have a shorter marketing cycle, which is that they generally don't start doing much of a push on their new movies until the previous one is already out. There are exceptions here and there, but Marvel kind of makes a point of not stepping on its own toes. So, you know, when we got our first Infinity War trailer, I cannot remember now if it was after Black Panther. It might have been right before Black Panther came out, but it was like pretty quick before. It wasn't overlapping with the primary push for the Black Panther marketing. And So again, and same with Captain Marvel. You know, not only did Infinity War come out, they've actually waited long enough that, you know, is it out on home video yet? It might be now. I should have checked that. But, you know, basically where that's run its whole cycle, and Ant-Man and the Wasp kind of came, and that was a palate cleanser in a lot of ways. And now, you know, we get a breather, and then, oh, right, Captain Marvel. And it's not stepping on the toes of the stuff that's already out, because that's one of those things that could possibly contribute to just a feeling of this is too much. You know, overwhelm and fatigue with the genre when you feel like you can't escape it. Like, oh my God, there's like 50 things coming out. Whereas what Marvel seems to be doing, which is pacing it out and be like, okay, look, here's this film. Now it's out. Here's the trailer for the next one. Or maybe like slightly before it's out. But like I said, not a ton of overlap. And again, because Marvel films are really successful, love them or hate them, they are very financially successful. And Hollywood loves to imitate success. So with Marvel sort of bringing us back to the 6-month marketing cycle again, I am hopeful that that will become the standard again for blockbusters as opposed to this year thing, which, God, I just don't think it did anybody any good. So those are my thoughts on marketing cycles. I have no idea what the heck I'm going to title this video. I don't know what you could call it that would be interesting at all. Probably no one will watch this. Ah, whatever. If you did watch it, whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Whole bunch of stuff you can do because there's buttons and there's links. They take you places and they do things like go to my Patreon, maybe. But in any case, take a look at them if you want to. And remember, folks, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.